All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. If folks are still coming in, the first couple of minutes is logistics anyway, and so they can get caught up by the time we actually start the content. We've got a great webinar for you today. It's part of our Fundraising in a Pandemic series, and we're going to be talking about maintaining donor contact through a summer drip campaign. And this was something that Jenny Desmond of Intercambio introduced this past summer to make sure that her funders knew they were still up and running, and it turned out to pay just fantastic dividends. So she's going to share what she did, why she did it, and the tremendous impact it had on their uh, uh, fundraising campaign in the fall. Just to remind everybody, we will be sending out a follow-up email with a webinar recording. Jenny's agreed to share her slideshow, so that'll be included. We'll have a write-up of the drip campaign that Jenny's going to be talking about, as well as a chat transcript, the Q&A transcript, and a certificate for people attending. I will ask a little bit of patience with that Monday deadline. I've had 4 days of webinars, so it may take me a little bit longer to get this one, all the materials put together and get the recording out, but it will be out next week by early next week. I'm still shooting for Monday though. We're going to ask in terms of the Zoom controls that you use the chat function to introduce yourself. If you want to share links or resources with the group or ask questions to the group, you can use the chat for that. But because the chat kind of scrolls every time somebody puts a comment in there, we're going to ask that if you have questions for Jenny about her drip campaign, that you use the Q&A feature, and you see the little icon there on the right. Use that to post your question. That helps us track the questions and make sure everybody's questions get answered. And Jenny's agreed to stick around after the end of the webinar to make sure everybody's questions gets answered. So we'll be cutting off questions at the top of the hour, and then Jenny will stick around to answer them all. Upcoming webinars, we've got 2 more in this series on March 30th, which it's hard to believe that's next week, the end of March. We've got one migrating multiple events to virtual environments. So going to be sharing different ways to do that. And then a new one that we've added, blind date with a book. And that's a recent one that we've added, and we're going to slide that one in on May 20th. And this series about fundraising in a pandemic has been funded by one of our tremendous literacy supporters. She's on our board of directors, Lynn Reed, and just kind of when the pandemic hit, she asked, how do you think I can help? What is it that programs need? And we had already been doing a lot of training around converting instruction to a virtual environment, and had just started hearing from programs about fundraising and their concerns that their fundraising events had been canceled, and they were worried about losing contact with their donors. So we put this together. So a lot of thanks from for Lynn Reed for sponsoring that. Other webinars we have coming up, our Distance Education Strategies and Solutions series that we're doing with the EdTech Center from World Ed. We've got a great presenter that's going to be talking about Google Jamboards and how to use them. In April, we've got one coming up on Foursquare writing. And then we've got a series of webinars in April, May, and June around our leadership training. You're going to hear from people that have taken the training, implemented different content that they found in the training to make changes in their literacy programs. They're going to be talking about those changes, what they did, why they did them, what was effective. And then we are right in the process of scheduling a series of webinars on different research briefs that we have published. So that's a little bit to kind of catch you up and tell you what to be on the lookout for. And now I'm going to introduce Jenny Desmond from Intercambio. She's got a fantastic thing that she did about the drip campaign. Jenny, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. and let you share yours.
That's great. Well, welcome everybody. I'm coming to you from Boulder, Colorado. As you can imagine, it's been a challenging week for all of us, just even emotionally, with the shooting that happened on Monday. My husband is a Longmont police officer, so nearby town next to Boulder. And so it's been trying for me too. But, our community, we trust, will come back stronger, and hopefully something like this will not happen again in any community. All right, so Intercambio, or Intercambio Uniting Communities is our full name. And we are a 20-year-old nonprofit based in Boulder, Colorado. We provide English language education, resources, and training to create connections, build cultural awareness, inspire confidence. So we're all about English, but we're about two-way mutual learning. And all of our teachers are volunteers. We have a staff of 16. And really our mission is to break down biases that we have in this world between communities, and enable people to grow from each other, learning from each other. And of course, our students learning incredible English. So we've created our own curriculum. This is the new version that we came out with last year, called Confidence and Connections. We also have a handbook called Pronunciation Fun, and the immigrant guide. I like to call it The Secrets to Living in the US. If you've ever lived in another culture, you know that there are all of these unspoken rules that are happening around you all the time. And the immigrant guide reveals some of those. So you can find those resources on our website. So last year, 2020, we moved things online March 17th, actually. And despite having to move everything online, we still had over 600 students, nearly 700 immigrant adults learn English with us, 351 volunteer teachers. We moved our community conversations online. That's a special program that we do once every term. In fact, I participated last night, where community volunteers come in and have 10-minute conversations with students in a class. And then you rotate and you talk to other students. And it gives them a chance to practice their English, their vocabulary, pronunciation, with new people aside from their teacher. So it's pretty spectacular. So we partner with over 500 national groups around the country, churches, literacy groups. And we now have 35 partners at the friend and family level, so they get extra training from Intercambio, inside access to our resources and our staff for their training. So the development department. So to give you my background, I've been at Intercambio for 11 years. I have a master's in nonprofit management, and I'm a former police officer as well. On our team, we also have the messaging and marketing manager, and she's actually the one that gets a lot of credit for this drip campaign that we did, because she said, have we ever done this before? She started with us about a month before we went into lockdown. And so she's been great at bringing a lot of ingenuity to Intercambio, to our marketing. But you can see on the slide that she's the only one of our development team that is full-time. So a lot of us work part-time, including myself. And we have a $1.5 million budget. Some years it's down to 1.3. And we really strive to raise $400,000 this year in individual giving from about 574 donors. So that gives you an idea. Aside from that, our revenue comes from grants, from foundations, local government, and then now we have the revenue generating side with selling our curriculum and some exciting online opportunities that are coming up this year. So the purpose of the campaign. So we created this drip campaign specifically to hyper engage our stakeholders. So we felt like the world is assuming that, oh, well, classes are not happening in person. Intercambio is shut down for the month of April and then the month of May, right? And then it kept going and going, and we had no idea that it was going to last this long. And so we wanted to engage our current donors, but also engage our volunteers, who I consider always to be pre-donors. Many people come, they volunteer with us, find out how great this resource is in our community, and they start giving as well. So this was a way to engage donors and volunteers. So we were very strategic in putting together, sending out the same message 4 different ways. So we mailed postcards to our highest level of giving donors. We sent emails to over 2,500 people. We posted on our Facebook page, which is super active. And then we had a link from all of these to our blog. And so the longer story showed up on the blog. And it introduces them to other stories of Intercambio, but it also gets our audience onto our website to see what else is happening at Intercambio, what else is available with Intercambio. So the first one we did was the student story. And now I know this is going to be really small for you. I apologize. But for the student story, we put together a postcard. We had it professionally printed, 150 of them, right? And we gave it a title, What to Expect in the Unexpected. And I skipped this slide. Where do our stories come from? The dream is to have a story bank where you can say, we need to put out a new story this month of something happening with a student who has become a US citizen. Let's go to the files and find it. Well, the reality is, I think it's a dream for all of us who work in the nonprofit space. If you're not mixing with your students and volunteers every day, it's hard to know the stories. And particularly with these stories, we wanted to highlight what people were doing during COVID and how they were still engaged in it with Intercambio during COVID. And so we didn't have a magic ATM to go to for this. Now we're preparing to celebrate we've been celebrating our 20th anniversary all year, and we're preparing a storybook. And so that is going to provide photos and stories for upcoming years. So we're getting on our story bank together. It's coming. Okay, so the first story we did was the postcard. We made it very skimmable, right? So if people just glance at the postcard, what's gonna jump out are the phrases in bold. So when her son was born with Down syndrome, learning English became more important than ever to Rocio, right? So Rocio has a name. We see the feeling and the emotion. You know, I can identify with this because I've had children, and your life changes when you become a mom. Thanking everybody. So your generosity is the foundation for Rocio to keep building a better life for her son. In addition to doing the story, so this is a super short version of the story on one side of the postcard. On the back, we put data points. Some people really resonate with data points. Some people resonate with a story. The call to action. So this is not a fundraiser postcard. This is a keep you engaged postcard, but we still, under our return address, we put the sentence, show your support, intercambio.org/donate. So super simple link that people can jump to give online. And these are pictures that, I mean, honestly, our development manager talked to Rocio on the phone and said, hey, could you text me a couple pictures? And she sent them over. So now the email, you have a little more space, right? But we keep the same design, what to expect in the unexpected. And we send out the email telling a little bit more of her story, but we put buttons on there so you can go straight to the Intercambio blog, or the button at the bottom is you can go straight to the website to give. Always make it easy for my donors to give. So if you missed the postcard, you know, your husband picked up the mail and tossed it in a stack, maybe you got the email. So our blog post, this is everything points to here. So in this case, what we did was 8 very short paragraphs that are in the blog post, which is part of our website. So it's also quick reading, right? The first paragraph is only 3 sentences, but it involves the emotions. So the longer story is the wave of emotions that comes with expecting your first child is unlike any other. So we put that in there. And then the Facebook page. We have another audience that's on our Facebook page every day, and a lot of our volunteers are on there. And so maybe if they missed it the other places, they'll see the Facebook page, which same title, has an intro, right? We've got 2 sentences and the link to take you to the full story on the blog. So then we replicated it a month later, and I'll show you my timeline and how we do the timing in slides to come. But we replicated it with the volunteer story. So the volunteer story, the title is, "It was the perfect match of ability and passion." And this photo shows, you can barely see the volunteer, but her student is on the cell phone and they're talking. We've got skimmable. We underlined, she wondered, could she still teach? But thanks to your generosity, Tara reports. And then we've got Tara's quote in boldface. And then on the front, again, we've got data points, right? So then this came out 4 weeks after the postcard. And so this was the sample of the postcard, but we did the same thing with our email, our blog, and our Facebook post. And we had our donor story. Okay, so now it's summertime and the George Floyd tragedy happened, and we want to keep talking about how we reach people from all different races, ethnicities, genders. And so we highlighted Juan, who is one of our board members, a former student of Intercambio, and a donor to Intercambio. So we highlighted his story. What was interesting was we mailed this out, emailed it, and this was the story that got the most reaction in terms of email responses from the mass email. I got many responses back saying, wow, this is so exciting. So cool to see what happens. And I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah. So that was the one that caused people to respond back in terms of comments. So planning and timing. So we had to decide who was going to be featured on each postcard. And we, around April 13th, we did that. And then we set our mailing emails. They're going to go out May 15th, June 15th, July 15th. So we really had a 4-week process for each postcard. And so here's the example. The first process for the student story postcard was April 20th. We're going to write the student story for the blog and collect the photo. And then the next week, we're going to get that story sent back to the student for permission. So part of our equity work is that we treat every person who is a stakeholder at Intercambio equally. And even though this postcard's not going to end up in your mailbox as a student, we want to respect you at the level that we would any board member, right? So, hey, did we tell your story well? Are we accurate on things? Do you feel good about this presentation? Design and edit the postcard, design the blog post and the mass email. And then the next week, we send it to a local printer. And if you don't have a local printer who can do things affordably and quick for you, you just might go to Vistaprint. So sometimes we use them because they are comparable in price and sometimes they can get it to us faster. And then the next week, we have a team meeting. Our team meets once a month. And so last summer we would meet in somebody's backyard, the 5 of us, and we'd be putting address labels and stamps on those postcards during the first 20 minutes of our team meeting. And then we mail them out. In regular times, we have volunteers that can do that, but not this year. So then we publish everything, and then we start the process again for the next round of Postcard. So some of the tools we use, we love Canva for design because it is simple, low tech, most anybody can use it. We use Salesforce to track all of our donors, students, and volunteers. And so Campaign Monitor is built into that. That's how we send out our mass emails. If you don't have that, go for MailChimp. They're easy, low-tech way. And what I love about both of these tools is you can track who's opening them and your open rate. And so it's a lot more effective than just sending something from your Outlook inbox. Volunteers, when possible, to place stamps on postcards. So what was the impact? And I was really surprised by this. If you look at the blue sections, those are the 2020. So last summer, we honestly didn't expect to raise money from these, from the drip campaign. It was a tool to keep people engaged when we started doing our fall fundraising. But despite that, between May and September, we had 25 donors, $12,000 came in. The year before, during the same amount of time, only $1,000 came in because we weren't sending out postcards. We weren't sending out messaging. And then we did a fall appeal. Traditionally, we've always done a fall appeal the week before Thanksgiving. And that's a full letter with a response envelope, and it goes out to 500 people. And then the email goes out to 2,500 people. So this year we did a pre-fall appeal. So we did a fall appeal, the first one that went out October 1st, and we had 21 donors engaged right then before the big fundraising time. So in the end, you'll see that last summer it was almost $23,000 came in versus the previous summer of $5,000. Now, I want to say it's all because of the brilliant work that my team did with the drip campaign. And yes, it was them, but also it was because we have to give COVID some credit that people are feeling paralyzed and don't know how to help. And so giving to their favorite nonprofit makes a difference. So what will we do this year? This year, our fundraising event, which is typically in April, is going to be in May. So we're going to use the same timeline, push it back a month. So the first postcard will go out mid-June, then mid-July, then mid-August. And this year we hope to have video clips where possible. So we have found that it's pretty easy to set up a time to meet with a student and then say, hey, can we meet on Zoom? Because now our students are all using Zoom for class twice a week. They say, sure. And then you get on Zoom with them and say, hey, this is so great. Do you mind if I record this? And you hit the record button. And then later you have this whole video. You can get the person saying, you know, taking English with Intercambio changed my life because now I can do blah, blah, blah. And so we would have access to video clips. And so we'll be using those for our Facebook, email, and blog as part of it. So I like to edit in YouTube because I'm low tech, but Allie, who's super talented on my team, our marketing and messaging manager, she does the editing on Adobe Illustrator. All right, what questions have you got? Oh, there's a couple of Q&A, huh?
Yeah, we've got some really good questions, and I've got some questions too, but I'll save mine to the end because I can talk to you at any time. So our first one, I think this is we'll start with this one, is why is it called a drip campaign?
Yeah, so we're letting the water out drip by drip. So instead of pouring the whole cup of water, you know, and saying, okay, here's 3 stories, student, volunteer, and donor. We're doing it bit by bit so that they're engaged each month in a story.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So kind of think about, yeah, just kind of easing people in, and the benefits of that, if I'm right, Jenny, is it maintains more consistent contact. right?
Exactly.
And engagement.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a question from Kristen, who says, are supporters receiving both a postcard and an email, or are you segmenting the lists in any way?
Well, we can do really fancy segmentation, but we try to keep it simple. So the 150 supporters who are receiving the postcard, they also get the email because it doesn't cost us anything to send the email. And then that email goes out to all of our donors and pre-donors. Sometimes people will open their emails, and sometimes they'll look at their mail. And so we figure it's better to over-engage rather than under-engage.
Excellent. And you, as you were presenting, you talked about that the story about Juan got the most responses. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I'm curious about, one, do you have any indication about why that was? And how are you getting responses? And then are you kind of measuring the responses of when you send the postcard out versus when you send the email out versus when you or when you post the social media, in any sense of which one of those avenues kind of was more effective than the others?
Yeah, we measure them somewhat. So you'll remember this slide shows the data points. But sometimes it's oh, that was a good story about the student. I should send Jenny an email, or I should respond to Intercambio. And then they don't do it. And then they get the next story and they're like, yeah, I should send a note to Intercambio. So it might be that, but I really think part of it is it's exciting to see our students engage on a board level and engage as donors, and do the full circle, be involved in every part of Intercambio at some time in their experience with Intercambio.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's an interesting point, and something for people to kind of keep in mind is viewing the campaign, the DRIP campaign, as a whole, as opposed to individual components. Because like you said, the first one, while they may not respond, that gets the ball rolling, so that when the second and third communications hit, Intercambio is already in their minds. They're already thinking about giving. They're already thinking about supporting and the work they do. And so it makes it easier for those second and third and subsequent stories to have an impact.
Exactly.
We have a question from Lily in the chat. She says, we are building our mailing list. How do you go about doing that?
Oh, that's a good question. So the two biggest ways, maybe there's three. So the obvious way is you host an event and you have people who are already engaged in your program bring their friends, right? So our fundraiser event that's coming up in May, this year we're going to do it as a drive-in. So it's called Comedy for Cambio at the drive-in. And the entertainment part, after we do the engage with Intercambio and donate to Intercambio, hear the student and teacher stories, the entertainment part is comedians. And so we'll have a big screen and people will be able to tune in through their car radio to hear it. So people who are not vaccinated, they're kind of anxious and uncomfortable, keep their windows up, they'll be good. People who are feeling a little more free will be sitting in the back of their pickup truck, right? But we still get to be together. So we encourage people to bring their friends to that. That's one way to grow your mailing list. Another thing that we've done is we call it behind the scenes. And we do once a month, our executive director or myself will do a 20-minute slideshow over Zoom. It used to be in person with a light lunch and share what's happening at Intercambio on all levels. right? So what are we doing new in student services? What are we doing new in our volunteer training program? What's happening? What are we bringing out around the country? And so that's another way to get people to bring people. And then the third way is volunteer recruitment. You know, even if somebody comes to the training and realizes, wow, I can't make the commitment for this, we've got their contact information. We know they love the organization. And a lot of times they become donors. The fourth way is we started doing this community conversations program where people can pop in for that one-time volunteer opportunity that I talked about earlier, where you've got 10 minutes at a time with 1 or 2 students. And that's something that has been really successful with our corporate sponsors and partners. And so, you know, local bank will say, hey, how do we get our name in front of your students? And I say, come, have your staff come to community conversations. And we do those through Zoom now. When we're back in person, we'll be doing them in person as well.
So I think those were a lot of great ideas, but I kind of heard a theme through all of them. One was have a lot of opportunities for people to come and engage with your organization through events, inviting them to your organization, have people bring their friends to extend your network, and then collect email addresses and contact information. Is that about right?
Exactly.
And then as you are kind of building that mailing list, I think kind of taking that question a little bit further. So you've gathered a bunch of just contact information. How do you start out? You know, is there a particular way you start out engaging people for the first time? Or do you just kind of integrate them into whatever communications are going out that week or that month?
Yeah, well, you know, best practices are you have a donor pipeline of first being meeting the organization. And ideally in our donor pipeline, they would meet the organization, they would come to some kind of event. So either community conversations or to a behind the scenes presentation. And that's from there, we start building relationship. What we have found is that people who don't know anybody on staff and they get anonymous letters or postcards that don't have their name on it, an email that doesn't say Dear Jenny, but it says Dear Friend, they tend to drop out faster. But if we can start making connections, and okay, I don't know everybody in our 600, of our 600 donors last year, but if our staff can start saying, I recognize these names, and they can say, oh, yeah, somebody named Kelsey called me and thanked me for my $50 gift. Oh, and then I got an email from Jenny. They start to say, oh, we know people in that organization. They start to feel connected. As development director, when people give over $1,000, they get a phone call from me. They get an opportunity to meet for coffee. I start to really engage them and find out what is it that turns you on about Intercambio? What's your passion and how can we help you learn more and engage more?
Fantastic, fantastic advice. I'm going to give folks, we've got give folks a little bit more time to ask questions. And Jenny, while you were talking about your plans to do a drive-in this year, we had somebody that's attending the webinar say that she actually, their organization did a drive-in event for their annual fundraiser in October, and it was a success and it was a lot of fun. If you don't mind, I would like to let her just kind of give us a brief description of what she did.
Tell us about it, Sabrina.
Okay, so Sabrina,
I give you permission.
Yeah, and I think I just did. You should have something that popped up that says you've been invited to speak or unmute. And
yes, I got it. Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Sabrina.
Yes. Hi, Al. So I'm Sabrina. I'm from Literacy Connects in Tucson, Arizona. I'm the Director of Development, Marketing, and Communications. And so we kind of did the same thing that you guys did when the pandemic hit. We just really started reaching out to donors. But our big thing was our annual gala. It was an annual lunch that we did every year. And we were trying to reimagine how we could do it and still keep people safe. So we went with a drive-in event, and our luncheon is usually 1 hour. We have an introduction, our executive director speaks, we have a video of our students, and then we, of course, have, our ask. So what we did is we did a hybrid event. There were some of us that were live. So our executive director was live. Our MCs were live, and then we had our video that was also shown on the big screen. So it was amazing. There were obviously some, technical difficulties, but it went over really, really well. Before the event, we did it at, here in Tucson, we have a place called Medalla Vina that does, they have like a horse property, and they do happy hours, and they do like artisan fairs on the weekend. So they have a huge open kind of like park area. So before the event, we offered people the opportunity to go in and actually have a cocktail. And the people who ran the venue socially distanced everybody and then would bring the alcohol to them. And that way everybody was sure to stay safe. We required masks, of course, if they were outside their vehicle. But it seemed to go really, really well. We normally, the attendance obviously was a lot smaller. We normally have probably about 300 people at our event. We had about 105 vehicles show up. But we raised money that we did not think we were going to raise. We raised over $100,000 at the event. And paid for all of our expenses. We did charge a small fee. We charged $20 for people to come in, and that included, we got boxed dinners. And so everybody got to pick from like 5 options for their dinner, and they had it in their car. So it was, people really, really enjoyed it and had a lot of fun. And we're gonna do another one in May for one of our programs that's called Best of Stories That Soar, which is a creative expressions program run through our elementary schools.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really fantastic, Sabrina, and thank you for sharing that. And I may actually contact you to get a write-up of that drive-in. So
Sure.
You never know what's going to happen when you attend one of our webinars.
You know what? No, that's great. We did it by the seat of our pants, but it was really a lot of fun.
Yeah. We have another question, Jenny, from Lily. Does your board of directors participate in identifying supporters and building relationships? And can you elaborate on that? Just kind of talk about the role of the board of directors in this whole process.
Yeah, it's tricky with a board because I think every nonprofit has a different agenda for their board. So for some, it's governance. For some, it's advising programs. For some, it's fundraising. I would honestly, our board shifts focus with the tides, you might say. And so I always encourage, we're at a place right now where we only have 2 of our 16 board members that come from wealthy philanthropic circles, right? So they know the movers and shakers that are giving generously in the Boulder County community, and they're inviting their friends. And so some years when those people roll off, I say, what are we going to do? How are we going to meet these people? So I try to, as a development director, I try to push that we keep people who are, at least a couple people on our board who are connected to the philanthropic community so that we can keep growing in that area. And, but, you know, and other times I'll call former board members and I'll say, hey, who can you introduce me to? Or, hey, this event's coming up. Who can you bring? So that we keep growing our major donor pool. And you also never know. I had a board member who typically gives $2,500 to $5,000 a year. And he contacted us 3 weeks ago and he said, my wife and I want to give $50,000 to Intercambio. Let's have a conversation. You know, so it really, part of it is being known in the community and developing a level of trust, because you never know who's going to step up and give in a big way.
I think that's good advice for kind of keeping in mind for your board and really for anybody that's connected to your organization. I know we talk to organizations all the time that have, and even in our own organization, we've had people that give, you know, $25, $50, $100 every year, and then 10 years from now they make a large donation or include us in their estate plan or something like that. So yeah, it's good. You never know when that opportunity is gonna come by. Okay, Jenny, that is kind of all the questions we have right now. I want to give people about another minute or so in case they're in the process of typing in something. I don't want to cut them off, but I want to thank you for coming in and giving this presentation about the DRIP campaign. And I think this is good information for all of us to integrate into especially our donor campaigns that we do in the fall, and just a good way of maintaining that donor contact with people on a regular basis. It's so valuable. It's so important. And then when it comes time to ask for the donation, you're always in their mind.
Exactly.
I want to thank people for coming this afternoon. And I don't see any more questions. I do see some comments about it being informative. And so thank you. And we're going to give people 15 minutes back of their life and let them go on about their day.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great week.